evening and a really warm welcome to you all from York ISSP. This is about our 10th lecture in the series, and I am really excited to introduce to you this evening Dr. Maria Phylacto and Dr. Bijal Patel from the Society of Endocrinology, and they're going to tell us all about it. I'm not sure I even knew what the word meant before we started organising this lecture. I am so excited to meet these two wonderful people who are going to guide us through a whole new world. Really enjoy, folks, and I cannot wait to hear what they've got to say. So have a lovely evening and see you at the end. I can't wait. Bye.
Great, thank you. Can everyone see my slides? So thank you for the kind introduction and the invitation to come and speak to you about endocrinology. My name is Bijal and this is my colleague Maria. We're both doctors specialising in endocrinology, and we're very excited to talk to you today about endocrinology and what we do and the sort of patients we look after. Hopefully you enjoy the presentation and understand more about endocrinology, and maybe we can even inspire you to consider it as a future career. Now, we want this to be an interactive session, and we'll ask you to answer a series of questions throughout the talk. So if you can all grab a second electronic device like your phone and visit www.menti.com, the screen below will appear, and if you can please enter the code 60421701. Or alternatively, you can scan this QR code here. Okay, so I hope you're all ready for a fun tour of endocrinology. Now, when I say to people, I am an endocrinologist, I am often met with a reaction much like this. So my first question to you is, what is endocrinology? Please enter the code 60421701 into menti.com and type in what you believe endocrinology is. So endocrinology is a study of hormones. So the obvious next question is, what is a hormone? Hormones are chemical messengers which convey information from one part of the body to another. Now let us imagine you have no food in the house and you feel really hungry. You might take out your smartphone and send a message to the restaurant to let them know as such. That message is equivalent to a hormone. It enables you to communicate with the restaurant and tell them that you are lacking food. The restaurant then reacts to this message by preparing your meal and begins sending you your food. And the restaurant will keep sending you food until you send them another message, telling them that you are now full. These messages help to make sure we have enough food, but not too much. So hormones help control the function of most of the processes in the body, for example, metabolism. It also makes sure that everything remains in perfect balance, not too much or too little, just right. In endocrinology, there is a hierarchy where the job of some glands is purely to check that another gland is making the right amount of hormone. An important gland that controls the other glands is the pituitary, and this is a very small gland located in our brains. The pituitary gland works by secreting a stimulating hormone into the bloodstream. This hormone then travels through the bloodstream to another endocrine gland and stimulates this other gland to make more hormones. Now, if this gland makes too much of this hormone, a message will be sent to the pituitary gland saying, stop, we have too much hormone on board. It will then respond to this message by producing and releasing less hormone into the bloodstream. And this will ensure that our hormones are kept in balance and just right. There are literally hundreds of hormones in the body, all doing very important work. So let's see which ones you are aware of. Can you now please refer back to menti.com and let us know which hormones you have heard of? Well done, lots of great hormones there, and you can see how varied and important hormones are in the function of the body. Now, each hormone is made by a gland in the body. So for the next question, we'd like you to name any endocrine glands that you can think of that make hormones. So here is a diagram of some of the major endocrine glands in the body. The hypothalamus and the pituitary gland regulate the majority of the hormones in the body. They make hormones including growth hormone, prolactin, as well as reproductive hormones. The thyroid gland in the neck makes thyroxine, and behind it we have 4 parathyroid glands which make parathyroid hormone that controls calcium levels in the blood. Next, we have the pancreas, which makes insulin and controls blood sugar levels. The adrenal glands, which just sit above the kidneys, make cortisol, which is essential for life. And finally, we have reproductive glands. These are called the testes in males, which make testosterone, and the ovaries in females, which make estrogen. Now, endocrinology is fascinating as it is a broad and varied topic. Unlike some specialties, like cardiology, for example, where you mainly focus on the heart, endocrinology, as you've just seen, involves the study of many hormones which work all over the body. Another great thing about endocrinology is that you can tell what condition a patient has by simply looking at them. And it used to be quite fun to spot what conditions people have while sitting on a train or bus, at least before we had to all wear our face masks. Endocrinology also involves rare and fascinating conditions, which as specialists you only get to see. And most importantly, endocrine conditions are curable or at least very treatable. So for instance, when our patients come to us feeling dreadful as they're missing a hormone, by replacing this hormone, we can make a huge difference to their quality of life and overall improve their well-being. As we said, the endocrine system is set up to ensure that hormone levels remain in perfect balance. If a person has levels of hormones that are too low, this can result in symptoms. Likewise, if the levels are too high, this can also lead to a different set of symptoms. Being an endocrinologist is like being a detective. Patients come and tell us their symptoms, and we then have to try and figure out which hormone system is abnormal and whether the body is making too much or too little of it. So now it's your turn to have a go at being an endocrinologist, and you have to try and figure out which hormone is abnormal in the cases that we will go on to present. So please go back to menti.com, and as we present each case, we'd like you to vote for what the problem hormone is. So our first patient who comes to clinic has too little of this hormone. Her symptoms were that she kept feeling super tired and very cold, even when the heating was on. She'd been gradually gaining weight, and everything in her body was generally running very, very slow, including her bowels, which led her to having constipation, as well as her thought processes, and she had a very slow pulse. By contrast, our next patient has too much of this hormone, and she felt really hot and was sweating all the time. She found herself losing lots of weight despite eating her normal meals. She was anxious and she couldn't sleep, and everything in her body was going super fast, including her bowels, and she ended up having diarrhea. She also had a fast pulse, which made her feel like her heart was racing. So, what hormone do you think could be abnormal here? I'll give you a few seconds to vote on Menti. Well done to all of you that guessed thyroxine. Now, the thyroid gland in the neck produces thyroid hormone or thyroxine, which is a very important hormone that regulates how fast your body does everything. So, when it's high, the body's metabolism is also very high, and you will burn up energy quickly to produce lots of heat, and this will cause weight loss. Whereas when it's low, the body slows down, people feel very lethargic and tired and very cold, with slow bowel movements and constipation. Both high and low thyroid hormone can be due to autoimmune damage to the thyroid gland. Now, what I mean by this is normally our immune system fights off foreign invaders like bugs, but sometimes it gets confused and begins to attack itself, and this is called autoimmune disease. This autoimmune damage is very common and causes lots of endocrine conditions. So our next patient who comes to the clinic has too little of this hormone. He tells me that he was always shorter than his friends at school and also had less muscle strength. On the other hand, another young man with too much of this hormone presented with being much taller than his friends. He was also experiencing headaches, was sweating excessively, and surprisingly, he wore size 14 shoes. So which hormone do you think might be causing these symptoms? Once again, have a look on Menti and vote for what you think may be the abnormal hormone here. Well done to those of you who guessed growth hormone. As you might imagine, the job of growth hormone is to regulate growth. Growth hormone is produced by the pituitary gland in the brain, and problems with the pituitary gland can cause either too much or too little growth hormone. After puberty, people's height is fixed, but if the pituitary gland makes too little or too much hormone before then, this will affect height. So before puberty, too much growth hormone can lead to people becoming very tall, which is called gigantism. In comparison, after puberty, people who have too much growth hormone don't get taller, but in fact, they can still have extra growth of other parts of the body, such as the jaw, the hands, and the feet. So moving on to our next patient who comes to the clinic. Again, this patient has too little of this hormone. She said to me that she was feeling very tired and dizzy and had lost loads of weight. And despite her not having been on a sunny holiday, She noticed that her skin was becoming progressively tanned. The second patient with too much of this hormone presents with weight gain, especially around the waist, and notices some purple stretch marks on his tummy. He also felt very tired and noticed that he would bruise and bleed very easily. So what hormone do you think is abnormal here? Please have a vote on Menti. Well done to those of you who guessed cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that is produced by the adrenal gland. Too little cortisol is often due to damage to the adrenal gland from an autoimmune disease called Addison's. Too much cortisol can either be because the adrenal gland is making too much, or if the pituitary gland produces too much of the controlling hormone ACTH. These high levels of cortisol can then cause weight gain and weakness of our tissues, such that the skin stretches and bruises very easily and doesn't heal well if damaged.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria and I'll take you through the next few cases. So moving on to another scenario. So we have another patient who came to see us in clinic and he had too little of this particular hormone. So he mentioned that he had cramps in his muscles, tingling sensation in his hands, his feet and around his mouth, and he had an epileptic fit in the few days before he came to see us in clinic. And we also noticed when we examined him that his heart was beating very irregularly. Now, on the other hand side, we had another patient with too much of this hormone, and he reported pain in his bones, passing lots and lots of urine, and that making him quite dehydrated. And he was feeling constipated and also quite confused. So please vote on Mentimeter for which hormone you think might be responsible for these symptoms. Right. So well done to everyone who guessed that the hormone in particular that we're looking for here is the parathyroid hormone. So the parathyroid glands are located in the neck, and in fact they sit just behind the thyroid gland and they make parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone's job is to keep the calcium levels in the blood at exactly the right levels. Too little PTH can lead to low calcium levels, and this can upset the function of the nerves and muscles in our body, leading us to feel cramps or tingling sensations or even have epileptic seizures. On the other hand side, too much PTH leads to too high calcium levels, and this can make us pass lots of urine and get very dehydrated and also feel quite confused. Now, the other major hormone that we need to regulate our calcium levels is vitamin D, which we get from the sun. And this vitamin helps us regulate how much calcium we can absorb from our food to keep the level in perfect balance. So moving on to another scenario, I'll present the case of a young boy who came to see us with too little of this particular hormone. He mentioned tummy pain and he was always passing lots and lots of urine and feeling a lot of dehydration and feeling very thirsty. He also looked quite unwell, and he mentioned being very tired. And his parents mentioned that he was losing weight. And the second patient I'll mention here has too much of this particular hormone and reports feeling dizzy and always feeling hungry, and sometimes also getting irritable in situations that are very unusual for her. And her parents report that she was gaining lots of weight. So which hormone do you think could be responsible for these presentations? Well done to all of you that guessed that this is insulin. Insulin is made by the pancreas and regulates the amount of sugar in the body so that it's not too much and it's not too little. Insulin lowers blood sugar. So if you have too much insulin, which can happen when the pancreas oversecretes insulin in a rare condition called insulinoma, this will result in low blood sugars. And this can cause symptoms like you might remember when you feel hungry and having low blood sugars. On the other hand, if someone lacks insulin, which is the problem in diabetes, they will have high sugars in the blood, which is harmful to many parts of our body. So let us imagine you eat food, and that sugar will be absorbed to the bloodstream. And if everything is working well, the pancreas will sense this and secrete insulin. And this will bring the sugar in the blood back down to normal. In patients with diabetes who lack insulin, blood sugars will stay too high and will cause symptoms like passing too much urine and feeling tired. And these patients need to inject themselves with insulin to make sure they can access the sugar in the blood and feel better. There are, in fact, two types of diabetes. The one that I've described is called type 1 diabetes, where patients lack insulin completely. This type of diabetes is more common in younger people and is an autoimmune disease that is not related to their diet. There is another type of diabetes that typically presents later on in life, and it's called type 2 diabetes. In this type of diabetes, the body can still make insulin, but it no longer works well to control the blood sugars. We say that the cell is resistant to the effects of insulin. This type of diabetes is more related to excess body weight, and in fact, obesity and type 2 diabetes are getting more and more common. So I'll just say a few words about obesity and hormones. People with obesity suffer from a lot of stigma, but it's important to realize that the major factor that controls our body weight is actually our genes. We know that our appetite is not regulated by things like greed or laziness, but rather by specific hormones that control appetite. So we need to stop blaming individuals with obesity just because they have been unlucky with the genes that they have received. Many of these appetite hormones are produced by the gut and are therefore called gut hormones. We know that this is the main problem because we can give people these hormones, for example, GLP-1, a hormone produced by the gut, and people can lose significant amounts of weight by specifically targeting their appetite. And here we have shown a picture of a child with obesity who lacks the ability to respond to one of these appetite hormones that's produced in the fat cells, and it's called leptin. And on the right side, we see the same child after he's been given leptin treatment, and you can see he has normalized his body weight. So increasingly, we are learning more and more about this, and we're learning to treat obesity as a medical disease rather than blaming an individual as having a certain lifestyle choice, which is not scientifically accurate.
Okay, hi, so it's Bijan again. So I thought now spend a few minutes talking to you about how to become an endocrinologist. So I'll talk you through my career trajectory and the journey that you take if you're interested in a future career in endocrinology. So firstly, I completed my GCSEs and A-levels, and I then studied biomedical sciences and medicine at St George's University of London. And it was here that I developed a true passion for endocrinology. After graduating, I trained for 4 years as a junior doctor, and although it was a busy time and involved exams, I found being able to treat and cure patients very satisfying. Following this, I decided to take a year out and lived and worked in Australia. And this really highlights that medical training can be flexible, and in fact, more and more doctors have been doing this. After I returned, I applied to be a registrar in diabetes and endocrinology, and I'm currently at this stage. Now, usually this takes 5 years, but I've chosen to get research experience and am currently doing a PhD at Imperial College London. Research is extremely exciting as it enables you to think and develop new ideas. It also is very important as you can discover new treatments, and a great example is from the work scientists have done over the past year in providing us with the new COVID-19 treatments, which previously didn't exist. Now, once I have completed this training, I will then be ready to be a consultant in diabetes and endocrinology. So it's a long road, but also very satisfying. And we'd just like to take this time to thank you for your attention. We hope you enjoyed this introduction to endocrinology and feel like you know more about it. If you would like to know more about endocrinology, I would like to point you towards a great resource, which is a website produced by the Society for Endocrinology called You and Your Hormones. It has lots of great articles, including what the major hormones are in the body. So please do log in and do let us know if you have any other ideas or suggestions that can make it even more useful. Thank you very much, and we're very happy to now take questions.
Hello, folks. Put as many questions as you can in the chat and we can answer them from the chat. That would be lovely. So questions into the chat on the video that you're watching, just poke them into the chat and they will get answered. That was amazing. I've learned loads and loads and loads. So I'm going to give the young people a moment or two to put a couple of questions in and hopefully we'll get some fantastic answers.
you read it out? No, you.
Okay, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. So I can see one here that says, what's the most rewarding thing about being an endocrinologist? And gosh, there's so many things that I think both of us enjoy about our specialty. For me, the most rewarding thing is that we have the opportunity to build lifelong relationships with our patients. So many of our patients have conditions that are absolutely treatable. So they come in with to us with lots of different symptoms. We're able to make a diagnosis, start their treatment, and then witness them on their patient journey when they get better. And then we get to see them and get to know them over the years. When they come back to us for follow-up, we get to see how they progress. We are able to do patient education, explain to them how to deal with their condition if they're unwell, for example, or if they're undergoing surgery. And we get to really know our patients. And another aspect I'm really enjoying is that there's a very friendly, very supportive community of endocrinologists. And I'm sure Bijal will agree with me. We are surrounded by fantastic mentors. Everyone's very happy to teach us as junior doctors. And generally, I think it's a very friendly, supportive specialty for us. Bijal, do you have anything to add? Okay, let's have a look if we have any more questions. Which one do you want to check one? Gosh, thank you so much for submitting all of these questions. Fantastic.
So from Zoe, there's what A levels did you take? So I studied biology, chemistry, and maths for A levels. Maria?
Yes, I studied very similarly maths, physics, biology, and chemistry.
One of the next interesting questions here is, which is your favorite hormone? God, so this is quite controversial. If I had to pick, it would probably be one of the reproductive hormones, but that's probably just because I'm doing research in that area. But there are loads and loads of hormones.
Another one here, another question from Mohammed is, what is the most important factor for being an endocrinologist? I think an important aspect of the job for any doctor is to be a good team player. So we always work with other people, and we always take into consideration other people's opinions. I think specifically for endocrinology, I think we do like to pay attention to details of the patient's history, for example, and details of their blood test results and how these change over time.
Okay, so another question here by Abraham is, what is the condition called when you have too much thyroxine? So normally when you have too much thyroxine, it can either be that your thyroid gland in the neck is producing too much, or it's whether the signal from the pituitary gland is producing too much. Now, commonly, it's the thyroid gland, and it's a condition called Graves' disease. And typically with this condition, people get the tremors, they're feeling very hot, but they get these unusual features in their eyes, which actually start to bulge out. And there are loads of medications, oral medications, as well as surgery to help treat this condition.
Another question from Shirley is, what is the most important hormone? Which is a very, very good question, Shirley, because there are a few hormones that are absolutely crucial and we need them for survival. Two of these hormones that I can think of are 1, cortisol, and 2, insulin. So we've shown you cases of these two presentations. So if someone doesn't have cortisol, they will feel very unwell. They will start losing weight. They will start having low blood sugars. They might be having episodes of collapse And in fact, it's a life-threatening emergency situation. So when we make the diagnosis, it's very important that we tell our patients this, so the patients know that taking their cortisol, so their prednisolone or their hydrocortisone tablets, is actually a life-saving measure. So they can never go without it. And that's where patient education and explaining these mechanisms to our patients is very important. The same thing applies for insulin. So people with type 1 diabetes who don't have any insulin are in a life-threatening situation unless they receive insulin. And type 1 diabetes used to be a life-threatening condition before we invented insulin. And actually this year we're celebrating the 100 years since the invention of insulin, which has completely revolutionized the way we treat patients with type 1 diabetes. So I would say these two are the most important hormones for survival.
Another interesting question is, what is the hardest part about being an endocrinologist? Well, I guess for me, it's more of the character that you kind of develop, because you always, as we said in the presentation, are a detective and want to find the answers. And so you always have in the back of your mind, why has this happened? Why has this happened? And, you know, maybe sometimes it can get a bit obsessive, but I don't feel that as a hard part, but sometimes, yeah, it can cause it to feel like a bit of a struggle. But so I guess that would be the hardest part for me.
What is the most common hormone that is lacked? Katrine is asking. I think probably in terms, if we're thinking about hormones lacking, I would say it would be type 1 diabetes and insulin. In terms of the commonest endocrine conditions that we see overactive and underactive thyroid patients very frequently in clinic. It's one of the commonest conditions.
So another question by Shirley is every condition treatable? And majority of endocrine conditions are, as we talked about, due to either too much or too little hormones. Now, there are loads of medications out there where we can either replace the hormones or give hormones to block them so that we can get to that perfect balance. Apart from medications like tablets, there are also surgeries, and ultimately, once you identify the cause of, you know, the too much or too little hormones, you can try and remove that and potentially cure the patient, which will, you know, improve their quality of life.
Sheila is asking, apart from being a consultant endocrinologist, what other roles are there within that area? Which is a very interesting question. So at the moment, the way we practice medicine in the UK, there are lots of different roles that doctors and indeed consultants fulfill. So one of them is to see patients, so carry out their clinical duties. But there are other things that they can be doing. For example, they can be involved in research. So that means doing some experiments, thinking about hypotheses and how we can test these either in the lab or whilst carrying out clinical trials, for example. Another aspect of their day job could be to be involved in teaching, either more informally, so teaching their junior doctors and their colleagues and other healthcare professionals in the hospital setting, or be more formally involved in teaching in a medical school, either medical students or teaching in postgraduate for postgraduate examinations and things like that.
Okay, so Francesca has then asked, what is the first point of contact if a parent sees any symptoms in their child? So if your child is acutely unwell, going to A&E will be the first step. However, if this is something that you've noticed over a period and your child is quite well in themselves, in the UK, we go to our general practitioners, our GPs, and GPs will initially do some basic investigations, as they do have knowledge of endocrinology. But once it gets to a stage where, they require specialist input, they will then refer patients to hospitals, what we call tertiary care centres, where you can get specialist endocrinologists to offer the advice.
Esther is asking, what is the rarest type of hormone disorder? I think there are lots and lots of very infrequent, very rare presentations. One that I can think of that's related to our research is a very rare set of conditions called congenital hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism, where patients basically lack some hormones and they don't go through puberty and they are not fertile. But the good news about this condition is that once it's diagnosed, we can offer treatment, and then young people who have this condition can go through puberty, and they can, in the majority of cases, they can be fertile. So they can undergo treatment and therefore be able to have children.
Okay, so this is a great question actually by Gillian. So it seems that many of the symptoms can be very similar between the faulty hormones. How easy is it to identify the problem, and can you have more than one faulty hormone? So you're completely right, Gillian. Most of the symptoms overlap, and in the first instance, it can be quite challenging. Now, one of the great things about endocrinology is, it's one of those specialties where patients come into clinic and you can actually tell sometimes from looking at them that actually this is the diagnosis. Obviously, in certain situations, it can be more overlapping, and that's when we have other sets of investigations like blood tests to actually check the hormone levels in the blood. This will then help you to kind of figure out where exactly the problem lies. Now, you've also mentioned about having, more than one hormone problem, and that is very true. We have these rare conditions like multiple endocrine neoplasia, which essentially involves different parts of the endocrine system. So your parathyroid glands, your pancreas, and your pituitary. And so there is also an overlap as well, which makes it even more interesting.
Another question from Katrine is, could mental health affect hormones? And more recently, we're realizing that, of course, stress or going through a difficult period in our lives can have certain effects on some of our hormones. So, for example, we know that cortisol, which is our stress hormone, can be higher in patients who have, for example, stress or anxiety. But also we know that especially women can be more sensitive to the effects of stress. For example, some women who have emotional stress from whatever external environmental factors can develop a condition called hypothalamic amenorrhea and stop having periods for a certain period of time. That's a fantastic question. 10 years.
So another question is, in the next 10 years, where do you think the most interesting, important developments in endocrinology will be? So that's a very interesting question. I think from my perspective, and because I am doing research within this area, I think biomarkers is the hot, trendy thing at the moment. This is essentially when you have blood tests that can indicate or predict if you have a certain disease. And we're finding more and more that actually these biomarkers can be used in clinical practice to help with the diagnosis and then therefore speed up recovery.
Fantastic. I think we've gone through the majority of the questions.
Can I just ask, I want to ask one of the questions that one of the young people asked. because I was absolutely fascinated by it. I know I shouldn't do this. This is just called power. They were saying, can hormones be affected by mental health or vice versa? So is there any correlation between a hormone imbalance and mental health issues?
Yes, yes. More recently, Kate, we have been realizing that there is a correlation. Especially, there's a hormone called cortisol that Bijal presented some slides on, which is our stress hormone, and that we know that that changes according to environmental factors, including how we feel. So whether we feel stressed, whether we're feeling anxious about certain aspects of our lives. And there have been studies out there showing that women who report being in stressful jobs, for example, or having stress for whatever reason, do have higher levels of this hormone called cortisol. And then specifically for women as well, if they do have high stress levels in their lives, that can also affect other hormones, especially reproductive hormones, causing a condition called hypothalamic amenorrhea.
I just think, before I thank you guys, I just want to thank the young people, the quality of those questions.
Yeah.
You have delivered a lecture to 11 and 12-year-olds. And that may as well have been sixth form, in terms of the quality and the maturity and the thoughtfulness of those questions. So just before I do anything else, can I just thank every single young person who has been engaged tonight, because those questions weren't from Key Stage 3. They were A-level type mature people that were about to embark on careers. They were fantastic. I don't know if you want to answer one more killer question, ladies. Is there one last question on the scroll you're going to give a go to? There are so many, and I am so stunned by their quality and their maturity.
Oh, so well, one here is what was your dream job as children?
Oh, yes, that's a lovely one to finish on. Go for it, both of you. That would be a fab one to finish on.
So, I mean, mine's quite out there. I wanted to be a singer. I was all X Factor, here I come. But unfortunately, my voice just didn't keep up with my thoughts.
Mine's a bit more boring. I wanted to be a doctor. So I did that. And then I discovered this wonderful specialty, which is absolutely very meaningful and very rewarding. And I'm really enjoying my training.
I can't get people to do a round of applause. If you were in the university where you really should be, in the University Hall at York, you would have probably had 200 children on their feet clapping, because that was phenomenal. Thank you so much. That was interactive. It was informative. I could have written on a very small postage stamp what endocrinology stood for before this evening. I've learnt loads. The engagement of the young people was amazing. Can I just say a huge thank you to Luke, who has been our unstinting technical support tonight. Is always amazing, and thank you so much. But just on behalf of York ISSP, can I thank you so much for a brilliant, informative, fascinating lecture, and just wow. If any of the young people want to email with something they didn't ask, we'll get a way of getting back to you. So if you've got something and that you want to ask that via our ISSP that really matters, we'll get back to you. So ladies, just wow. Thank you very much, and good luck with both of your studies and your research. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Kate and Luke.
Thank you so much for having us. And the last thing to say is that the reference to You and Your Hormones, the Society for Endocrinology website, was specifically made for young people and patients with conditions and their parents. So feel free to have a look at it. It's being updated very regularly, and if you have any suggestions of other topics that you'd like to know more about, and you can find them on there, please feel free to email us, and we'll make sure that the website is updated.
That's phenomenal. Just absolutely phenomenal. Please hear the clapping that is happening, even though it's going across airwaves. Thank you so much, ladies. That was brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you
Great.
for having
Thank you
us.
so much.